All right, folks, welcome in to Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at BetOnline, number 38. I am your host, Ryan Blackburn at NBA Blackburn on Twitter, part of the Mile High Sports Podcast Network, and I'm excited to talk about the Denver Nuggets as we get a reaction to Media Day. I was one of the folks in the audience asking questions today of Denver Nuggets players, Calvin Booth, Michael Malone, everybody in between. It was a good experience. It was good to be back at the building. Some good moments, some bad moments, some interesting moments in between, but always nice to be able to see the folks get back into the swing of things, and it did really have a nice, exciting feel to it. So we'll be talking all about it. We'll absolutely go over some of these details. Russell Westbrook introduced to the Denver Nuggets fan base, and I think he made a pretty solid impression. And then a variety of other things as well. I am your host, Ryan Blackburn. Again, thank you so much for tuning into the show. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Would absolutely appreciate it. Really quickly, this podcast, as you know, it's brought to you by the good folks over at BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Head on over to their website and get in on the $200,000 MegaContest and pick 5 games against the spread. Maybe you could start even betting some NBA stuff heading into this season. Now we've got some real things that are going. You might be able to get some Russell Westbrook 6th Man of the Year odds, which, hey, I don't know. Might happen. Could be interesting. Make sure to go check out BetOnline for everything betting and let them know that you came from Mile High Sports. All right, let's get into it. Very excited to see folks. Monday Series says, hey, what's up, Ryan? What's up? How are you? Thank you for stopping by and hanging out. I know this is an abnormal time for me to go live, but today was an abnormal day. Got an early start this morning, got down to the arena before 9:30, and we were going for about, I'll say, 3.5, 4 hours or so. It was like we didn't really have many breaks either, and the players were going through it. They everything was in the auxiliary gym, which made for some sketchy audio at times, especially while sitting on the chairs that they had laid out in front of there. But we still got some good insight and some good content, I think, that we'll be able to go over during this stuff. Monday Series asks, do you think Dario Saric will be the Jokic of the second squad? I don't know much about Saric. That was honestly, that was an interesting takeaway from today. Had a bunch of folks on the team discussing a bunch of different things that some of the new guys, and I think Aaron Gordon was the one who called him the Jokic of the second unit and said, I don't know if you guys fully understand what kind of impact that he can have. And that is a great, exciting endorsement from Aaron Gordon on Dario Saric. I thought that was an interesting little thing that popped up today. Dario looked very big. He said he was he could play both the 4 and the 5, whether it was more of a traditional power forward or playing kind of that stretch 5 position. And he looked pretty tall. He looked like he was 6'10", 6'11", and that's exciting because the Nuggets, of course, need size on that second unit as much as they could possibly get, and hopefully that continues to translate for them. But I'm very excited to see what it looks like with the second unit, what these practices are going to look like. Apparently, Zeke Naji and Vlatko Cancar went through some open runs with Dario Saric, and that's something that I think they're going to have some fun with. So should be good. All right, let's get into some other notes, though. We're going to do some general takeaways in the first segment. Second segment, we're going to be kind of, are you more excited? Are you concerned? After seeing that, probably going to be not a shorter episode, but timely episode today. First thing I wanted to mention at the top, Calvin Booth. He and Michael Malone spoke separately. Michael Malone spoke first. Calvin Booth spoke second. There's a lot of things that I could get into from what Michael Malone said. And I might even do a separate show at some point on all of the things that Michael Malone said. He went for about 20 minutes, probably could have gone for about 40 or 50. I had so many more questions, but the good thing about practices is we'll be getting an opportunity to speak to him in the coming days. So there will be more things to ask him going forward. But Calvin Booth had a fascinating quote about Denver's rotation. He said, we have 9 real guys in the rotation that they are very excited about, that they believe in, that he believes in, that thinks that would be in the playoff rotation for anybody in the NBA. And I thought that was interesting. And so you go down to it. All right, got the assumed starters, or at least 4 of the 5 starters with Jokic, Murray, Porter, Gordon. Obviously, those guys for sure. I think he says Christian Brown, Julian Strawther, I think, is one that he would also include in there. And then Russell Westbrook, Peyton Watson, and Dario Saric. And that was, I think, a fascinating breakdown to me. So you get the 2 guys that you added to it. What's up, guys? What's up, Luke? Shout out, Luke. I played baseball with Luke back in the day. Luke was better than me. Unfortunately, that was definitely a thing. He won Player of the Year in high school. That was pretty sick. Good to see you, man. But yeah, so I think Denver's got 9 guys, and I think they feel, and at least Calvin Booth feels, that he's got 9 guys that he can really trust. And I'm curious to see what it looks like for Denver. And maybe are they going to go with 10 players in the regular rotation? Are they going to go with kind of a mix of different units? What's it ultimately going to look like? But if you feel like you have 9, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good sign. And Calvin Booth is obviously very open with this. He's definitely so very much open. And that's both a good thing and a bad thing. When I asked him about the Jamal Murray extension, he kind of rolled his eyes at me because I was the one who reported about the timing of things and all of that. But it's going to be, yeah. Actually, let's get into the Jamal stuff now. Cedric, he answers with 199. Thank you, Cedric, for the super chat. Why Jamal so dismissive, Ryan? What's wrong with him? I don't know, man. Sometimes Jamal gets in those moods. Sometimes he's just one of those guys that can get a little bit frustrated with everything. And I think he probably heard all the chatter. He probably heard all the talking. And I'm sure that my reporting didn't really help. And he was very short with me as well, which is something that is I'm not used to it with him, but sometimes he gets short with me, just like he gets short with everybody else. But yeah, I mean, he doesn't really like doing this. And this is the second media day in a row where it really felt like that. So hopefully this is just something that he feels like he needs to get out of the way, and then he'll be better going forward. But I don't know. I figured that 200 million in the bank would feel pretty good, and he'd be able to talk about that a little bit. But I don't know. We'll see. We will see if that changes. But yeah, so Jamal was kind of out of it, not feeling super talkative today. Nikola Jokic showed up with a goatee. That was pretty fascinating. Seeing Jokic do what he needed to do. I was the one who asked him that first opening question about, hey, this is your 10th media day. Has anything changed at all? And he was like, no, I don't know why we do this. I don't know what this is for. It kind of, I think, maybe playing into the bit a little bit, but he obviously feels that way too. And so that kind of went viral today. I saw that being like my voice posted on several different clips on several different social medias, which I thought was fascinating. But yeah, like it's fascinating to see Joker and how he's sort of evolved in this. He's very serious a lot of the time, but he also addressed that too and said that he doesn't necessarily show the excitement on the outside all the time, but he's always excited. He's always excited to play basketball, to be with his team, and to be around. It's just the hoopla and the experience and having to talk mandated media sessions. Like, I'm sure that gets to him. And we've gone through this song and dance with him several times, so not really surprised about it. But he is up and down when it comes to just how he approaches some of this. Sometimes he's really good, sometimes he's not. And it sort of felt like he was making a point, I guess, to be like, Another day in the life of Nikola Jokic. It must be brutal, huh? must be brutal. Um, yeah. Beyond Definition says horrible question, Ryan. Yeah, I don't know if it was horrible. Like sometimes you just need somebody to break the ice, and sometimes when you're asking the first question, especially on the first day of the season, it can it can be really difficult. And being in a room where I got to tell you guys, I was carrying the load a lot of the time. There were not a lot of people that wanted to ask questions, especially to some of the other guys. Um, and I did a lot of asking questions today. Not necessarily because I wanted to, but sometimes feel like there's an obligation. There's an obligation to keep these things going because you get a limited amount of time with everybody, and you do your best. And sometimes you hit, sometimes you miss, but it got a good reaction out of everybody. So part of that is like part of the ability to ask the question is just like, hey, do you generate a reaction? And is it a good reaction? Is it a bad reaction? Sometimes you go for good most of the time. I try to be positive, but and I know you're joking. I know you're joking for sure. But it is fascinating to be in that room for sure. What else? Should we talk about Russell Westbrook? Let's talk about Russell Westbrook a little bit. First and foremost, the intro to Russell Westbrook was centered around DeAndre Jordan as well. DeAndre, I think, was the first one to go. If I'm not mistaken, oh no, it wasn't. It wasn't DeAndre, but it was somebody, and so everything kind of blends together. DeAndre and Russell Westbrook, I think, are going to be the new Jeff and DeAndre. I honestly think that that's what's going to happen. It seems like DeAndre really battled for Russ to try to get here. He said he really wanted him to get here. Russ was saying that DeAndre was one of the biggest reasons and the ultimate kind of swing factor for why he wanted to be here. I thought that Russ was great today. I know that he's like trying to set a good impression. He's trying to put on his big, bright smile and do everything that he can to endear himself to a new fan base and media group. And there will be times where he gets a little bit more volatile and combative, and that's just how the cookie crumbles. But I honestly thought that Russ was great. And I got my softball question in for sure. I asked him about Westbrook Academy, and he lit up and was very excited about it. And was just very excited to share about the work that he and his wife Nina had done for the city of Los Angeles and kind of the South Los Angeles area by adding a whole school to it, which is super, super cool. I think that Russ has a variety of ways that his season could go for Denver. I think that based off of this and just based off of what we heard today and just sort of the impression that you get from everybody, there are a lot of people on the Nuggets that really respect Russell Westbrook and really want him to succeed. They will go out of their way to help him kind of make things work. And I think they're going to allow him to play his game again. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know, because there's so much that he does, and like he's always 100%, and he's very amped and very competitive, and sometimes that aggressiveness can be used against him. But more often than not, like it's a good thing to be aggressive in the NBA, to be definitive in the NBA. And if the Nuggets have other guys that can play off of that, that understand that, then maybe this will be a good situation for him. And maybe it won't, but we'll have to find that out together. So I'm looking forward to seeing what ultimately becomes of it. Grace, hello, Grace. How are you? I saw that you had Steve Jones on to talk WNBA playoffs on What's in a Game. So everybody make sure to go check out What's in a Game and get their WNBA playoff fix. That's a big get. Congratulations, Grace. Was Pickett around today? Did you ask about him? I did not ask about Jalen Pickett because it kind of ended before, like the media session kind of ended before I realized what was happening. And then I realized, okay, the only two guys that didn't talk today were actually there were four. Two of the two-way players, PJ Hall and Spencer Jones, and then Deron Holmes, who is out with an injury, and Jalen Pickett. And it's funny because we got all three Exhibit 10 players at the same time. And I was asking those guys questions, like really digging deep, obviously, because I want to see those guys be successful. I just don't know enough about Jameer Young and Jalen Williams and Gabe McLaughlin. But I was excited to see that everybody kind of got an impact there. But Pickett was not, or I mean, he was here, he was in the building, but he did not speak. I don't know why. Maybe he made a request to not have to speak, and maybe it was granted. I don't know what ultimately happened there, but I doubt that the Nuggets prevented him from speaking. So kind of odd, kind of an odd thing. Okay. Pivoting from that, why don't we take a break? When we come back, we'll get into some more of the overall points that happened today, including Michael Malone talking about conflict with the front office and the starting shooting guard spot between Christian Braun and Julian Strawther. We will be right back on Pickaxe and Roll. All right, we're back. Pickaxe and Roll, Ryan Blackburn here. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Would really appreciate it. All right. Like I said, Michael Malone talking about conflict, and he was asked, I think, a really good question by Matt Moore, colleague Matt Moore over at Action Network and Locked On Nuggets about the rumors, the stuff that came out that Zach Lowe, who, by the way, let me pivot to that really quick. Zach Lowe is one of the reasons why I got into sports writing, why I got into reporting, why I thought that this was a thing that I could do as a job. I've met Zach Lowe, and he was just let go today or recently by ESPN, and just a really sad state of affairs for the state of NBA media. There's a lot going on. It's just a really, really tough business. And if Zach Lowe is a guy that's getting let go because of like clicks and analytics, and you're not driving enough engagement on your TV, things like that, that's a really tough place to be for all us nerds out here. So he'll find a great landing place. I'm sure that Bill Simmons has already contacted him. Hell, maybe DNVR is adding him to the mix with Tim Legler and that crew, and they could form a super pod. But that would be like that's a tough loss. And so I'm hoping that like Zach obviously lands on his feet. He's a super nice guy, and he knew who I was, like at the NBA finals and the conference finals. Like I didn't have to introduce myself. He actually knew who I was because he cares about this stuff and cares about each team. And that to me is just like, that's a really valuable trait for anybody in sports media. So hopefully I think he will be just fine, but was just kind of a sad state of affairs, I think. All right. As I mentioned, Michael Malone and conflict. There had been a little bit of discussion following the Zach Lowe pod about Michael Malone and not Tim Connolly, Calvin Booth, and just what conflict that there had been between those two guys about front office stuff, coaching stuff, decision making, things like that. And Bennett Durando, who you should be following at the Denver Post, he posted the full transcript, Michael Malone's comments on how he approaches conflict and disagreements with the front office. And Malone said, quote, "I think as long as we're aligned and communicating and collaborating and also challenging each other, like Calvin and I shouldn't always agree. If we're always agreeing, we're not really accomplishing what we need to accomplish. But through those disagreements and through those conversations, you come to a greater good. And this is a reality. I mean, you look across the NBA landscape, teams are getting great players, letting great players walk because they don't want to approach that really dirty word second apron. And as a coach, I have to educate myself because I put blinders on, but I have to give respect to Calvin and I have to give respect to Josh and understand it's more than just tonight. it's also this much bigger perspective on how we're going to be set up for success, not just this season, but for down the road. All you ever want to support from your front office and from your ownership group, and I have that. I've had it from day one, and I feel very fortunate to have the relationship I have with Calvin and Josh. I thought that that was super fascinating. And the reason for that is it's been noted around that there has been conflict. It's been discussed. I've discussed it, of course. But you can have conflict and still be okay. You can absolutely have that. And I definitely think that the Nuggets are kind of in that place right now where they're at the half life. And I've described this before. Calvin Booth said earlier today that he thinks they have about 5 more years left of that Nikola Jokic championship window. I said on the previous podcast that I thought it was about 4. And I might be definitely doing that a disservice. It might be 5. But it's going to be fascinating to see where this goes because these are the tough conversations that these guys are always going to be having. That's why KCP leaving was such a big kind of difficult spot for both of those guys because I didn't think that he was going to be worth that contract to the Nuggets going forward with the way that they had, like what they had going on. And a lot of other people, like in Calvin, or Michael Malone, obviously wants KCP to be around because it gives themselves a chance to win a championship right now. And I don't blame either guy for having that perspective. So as long as it's kosher, as long as it's not like a toxic work environment where these guys are yelling at each other and breathing down each other's throats all the time, then I'm okay if these guys are kind of fighting each other a little bit. Like you want that, in my opinion. You want them to be a little bit more like abrasive towards each other, trying to challenge each other to be the best versions of themselves that they can be. And then hopefully when you meet at that nexus point, when you meet at that critical point in the middle, that's where the happy medium happens and you win a championship or maybe you win multiple. And so I just thought that that was interesting. I was very curious to get that perspective from Michael Malone, and I'm glad that Matt asked that question. But more than that, from Michael Malone, talked about the shooting guard battle between Christian Braun and Julian Strawther. I am fascinated by this because if we kind of thought that this would be an open competition, that it would be something where he's not going to immediately declare a starter. I didn't think he was going to limit it to Christian Braun and Julian Strawther, though. I thought he was going to leave it open to like 4 guys. Like, hey, what happens when Russell Westbrook's out there? What happens when Peyton Watson's out there? It does seem to me like the choice is between Christian and Julian, and everybody else is kind of like in their position. Like Peyton Watson's going to be a backup 3-4. Russell Westbrook's going to be your backup point guard. And then Christian and Julian are going to be your starting and backup 2. And that was fascinating to me because I think it might be a little bit limiting in terms of the perspective, but I also understand it just like, hey, let's try to make the decision as easy as possible between those 2 guys. Try not to get too complicated with this. But the way that he described it, Michael Malone did, was you just want to be able to fit really well around and be complementary to what lineups are already out there. And he mentioned which player would complement the starting lineup better, which player would complement the bench lineup better. To me, that sounded like he was hinting at Christian probably being the starter, given that he's more of a defensive-minded, fit in around those offensive guys kind of player. Whereas Julian, you're going to need some offense, you're going to need some spacing, you're going to need some versatility on that end of the floor that Christian probably isn't going to provide as well. We've kind of seen what that looks like with the second unit, and it hasn't been it wasn't super impressive last year from Christian's side of things. So I do think that Christian kind of profiles pretty well as that KCP replacement, while Russell Westbrook and Peyton Watson and those guys kind of profile as a Bruce Brown replacement, if you will. Now, there's obviously gaps there, and Julian Strawther has to find his place in what is going to ultimately happen. But if he could consistently be generating like 8, 9, 10 shots a game off the bench as a floor spacer, somebody who could really space the floor, provide some attention, take some attention away from Russ and from Dario Saric and Peyton Watson, maybe a starter that's staggering there, then that would be a good thing. That would be a good thing. But this is an interesting comment. Malone Loki feels like Strother should start, but he can't just do it right away because of the team hierarchy. I bet Strother takes it by the end of the year. I will say this. Michael Malone is high on Julian Strother. He really likes him as a player. He likes how he was immediately able to kind of step into a role and say, all right, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is how I have to see the game. I have to be understanding of what the game asks for. And Strother, I think, immediately started to do that pretty quickly. Now, was he perfect? No, of course not. But, and especially, like Julian actually talked about that. He said his shot numbers weren't where they wanted to be, weren't where he wanted them to be, but he believes in himself as a better shooter than that, and started to really see the game slow down for himself while he was out. And I thought that was fascinating because he shot like horribly when he came back, although it was more of a, it was like irregular minutes at that point because Justin Holiday was consistently in the rotation over him. It's going to be interesting. Going to be really, really interesting to see who ends up starting. Apparently, they're both going to get opportunities with that starting unit. And I would love to see every single combination under the sun. I did not get to ask this question at Media Day today, but I will ask it to Michael Malone probably tomorrow or sometime this weekend. Like what it would look like if Nikola Jokic staggered with the second unit, how much he wants to change things versus keeping them the same and trying to experiment with different stuff, given that he's got a new group here. I'm curious to see what happens and what is ultimately discussed and put forth, but should be fascinating to see what he ultimately looks like. Couple things before we hit another break. Michael Porter Jr. weighs 236 pounds right now. That's what he said. And I was fascinated by that because he's already 6'10", absolutely. But one of the things that he is a 6'10" guy like had going for him on the perimeter was that he was still pretty light. He was still built like a wing in a lot of ways. Wasn't like putting on a whole bunch of muscle. He looks bigger. He looks bigger, and there's some good to that, and there's also some bad to that. I kind of worry about his back a little bit, adding a whole bunch of weight. I am not a doctor. You do not need to like check my credentials because I don't have any for being a doctor in that situation. But like carrying a little bit of extra weight, I wonder if that puts a little bit more pressure on his back, especially with the physical toll that he's playing. Can he handle that at the 3? Is it more likely that maybe he moves to the 4? Like, because I don't know, 6'10", 236 pounds sounds like a 4 to me. Sounds like a modern day power forward. It's just fascinating to hear that from Mike. So I'm curious to see where he ultimately lands. He said he wants to be about 232, but like he looked strong. He looked big, and he looked a lot like Aaron Gordon, if I'm being honest. Like those guys looked about the same size, which is just interesting to see because usually Aaron is the one who's built and just like absolutely jacked. Mike looked jacked today. Like he looked bigger than a true small forward. He looked like a true power forward out there. BS14 asks, what's up, Brian? Obviously, Zeke's contract is a disaster with the lack of draft capital left. Would one of the 3 young guys be an attractive enough package to get off him? You don't want to trade one of the young guys just to get off a contract. Like Denver can win a contract. They could win a championship with Zeke Naji on the roster, like, and not play him. That's not a thing. That is not the direction that I would go if I were the Nuggets. I think that you want to make sure that you're not giving up young players that can continue to raise your ceiling, because the moment you trade one of those guys, whether it's Christian, who you're thinking you're probably going to start at shooting guard, or Julian, who might be your other alternate for starting at shooting guard, or Peyton Watson, who I think is probably the best prospect of the 3 and just happens to play a different position. Like, I don't want to trade any of those guys if I'm a Nuggets guy. Like come on. It's just, I think that's a little bit too far. Aaron Gordon, by the way, thought it was very interesting. He reacted in a fascinating way when asked about Team USA and Serbia, said he was very conflicted. and also said that he felt like he was snubbed from the process by Team USA, that he had gotten a call and then they never called back. And I thought that was fascinating. But he was talking about how Joker was really giving it to those guys and really doing everything that he could to win against Team USA. And Aaron was kind of rooting for him for that. But then he also finished up his press conference with Murica. So who knows? By the way, would not have thought that Aaron Gordon was going to be the guy to Murica at his his press conference, but we move for sure. That's as Cedric said, AJ is Mr. Nugget. Oh, that was the other funny thing today. That might have been the funniest moment of the press conferences. Aaron Gordon asked by Brendan DeVoe about his clothing, like the giveaway that he was doing, and just how big that was, how awesome it was really cool to connect with your fans. Were you trying to earn brownie points as Mr. Nugget? And Aaron says, and I was just having a garage sale, man. It was so funny because he's just like, yeah, man, everybody has a yard sale. I just didn't want these clothes anymore. It was like, yeah, let me just give them away. And it turned into something a little bit bigger than he thought. But he really was just like, I gotta get rid of these clothes. They look horrible. That's so funny. Oh my gosh. He's the best, man. The other thing that I don't think I mentioned, the contract with Aaron Gordon. I hope he gets this contract, man. I know I talked about oh man, do you really want to give out the contract because of the age, the aging curve, the potential for decline, things like that. Stuff doesn't matter when you win a championship. When you're still very good like he is, he's in his age 29 season. He is still a very massively impactful player for the Denver Nuggets, and I hope that he is a part of things for years to come. Just a great player and somebody who I think the Nuggets want around. So hopefully they can get that done sooner rather than later. Calvin Booth also said that, by the way, that September 27th was the official day, and he feels like they want to get something done. And the last thing, Dario. Actually, no, I already talked about Dario. What else? Have I missed anything, folks? Anybody want me to discuss anything else about here? Russ did discuss he doesn't want to be kissing babies. That's something that he put out there. He's gonna go out and try to kick some ass, which is great. I love that for Russ. I think that he's you never want him to change. You want him to be the best version of himself. And maybe that's a little bit more mellowed out version at times, but I still think that the Nuggets are going to be, it's going to be interesting watching Russ with the second unit. And I think Nuggets fans, they'll probably be a little bit more accepting of some of the times where Russ isn't awesome, because obviously the last 2 years of the Nuggets bench lineups have not been awesome. So hopefully Russ can provide some attitude there. All right, let's take one more break. When we come back, we are going to discuss whether the Nuggets fans should be excited or concerned after this media day. I have my own opinion, but let me know what you think. Should the Nuggets be excited or concerned? But first, I want to talk to you about number 38, who are doing a great job as part of the DNVR community. What am I saying? The Mile High Sports community. Good Lord, that's not going to go over well. Mile High Sports and number 38 are partnering and have been partnered for a while, over the course of the last year or so, and just been doing some great watch parties, always making it fun and accessible to be a Nuggets fan and an Avs fan and a Broncos fan. Whenever you want to be out there supporting and just having fun with your friends, your family, number 38's got you. They're a bar in the Rhino area who do a great job. You get a wristband, you check it in, you get all your food, and then you just scan your wristband everywhere you go. And then at the end of the night when you need to pay, That's when you get your total. You don't have to worry about credit cards. You don't have to worry about anything crazy until the end of the night. All you got to do is just get their wristband, and they will take care of you from there. Number 38 is awesome. Make sure to go check them out and let them know that you came from Mile High Sports. All right, final segment, Pickaxe and Roll. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. Would really appreciate it. Final segment, let's go really quickly here. Should Nuggets fans be more excited or concerned after what we saw? Yes, Jamal Murray was a little bit a little attitude to him. Yes, Nikola Jokic was like, do I have to be here? This is the same thing every year. Also, I think Jokic was a little bit resentful because, as I've mentioned on this podcast before, he had to go from Serbia to the United States and then travel in 3 days to Abu Dhabi. So I can understand, as father Nikola Jokic, husband Nikola Jokic, he probably doesn't want to be moving his family around for that. So, and that he probably doesn't want to be away from his kid. So I don't know whether Natalia and Augana are actually traveling with him and doing this entire gauntlet that he's doing. But traveling across the world is not fun when you're Jokic. So got to do what you got to do. But going to be fascinating to see what ultimately is happening here. Erie Mouse says, concerned. The most important moment of the media day is Booth saying we are halfway through the 10-year window and that winning another one would be incredibly hard. Tells you everything you need to know. I disagree. I think that Booth was very confident and maybe a little bit too confident when it came to winning another championship. Denver struck the perfect chord in 2023. And I think this last year, despite the fact that Denver had a lot of things going for them, it doesn't always mean that you're going to win a title. And you had a slight injury to Jamal Murray. You had the wrong matchup in the playoffs. There's sometimes things just go wrong and sometimes things don't work. So I think you got to give yourself as many chances as possible. With him, Booth said that they're halfway through the 10-year window because he's looked at the numbers like I have. It is a sobering reality, but that's his job. It's his job to do everything that he needs to do to give the Nuggets the proper perspective on how hard they need to push. And so losing a guy like KCP might not be great for the first half of this 5-year window now that they have, but it might be better for the second half of the 5-year window when KCP would be 34, 35, and you've got guys like Peyton Watson and Christian Brown that are 25, 26 in that general range. And it might just be a little bit better at that point and more helpful at that point. So I am not surprised at all. I assume this is about Joker. Give him compliments to keep the beard. The fans want him to keep the beard. Yeah, the goatee. That was interesting. It doesn't sound like he is going to. It doesn't sound like he is ever going to keep it, but who knows? Maybe that changes. It did seem like a very interesting choice from him this offseason, but I like it. I think he looks pretty good with facial hair, so just a very distinctive look. I remember when Dirk Nowitzki came back with the beard in 2011, and everybody was like, "Wow, this is serious. This is pretty legit." I think Joker's got to grow it a little bit more thickly, but I don't know if he can. So who knows? Unfortunately, I can grow much of this, but it's these two parts right here that leave me, and I'm like, it doesn't fully have the same effect as when it all connects. So look, it's all good. I think Nuggets fans, if this is the beard Jokic year, it'll be very distinctive. That's for sure. All right. I am excited. Media Day generally does that to you, but I am excited for this upcoming year for the Denver Nuggets. One of the things that I thought was really interesting, Dario Saric was getting a lot of rave reviews from the team based off of the open runs that he had, based off of previous experience everybody had going against him. There are a lot of people that were saying Dario Saric is going to have a big year for Denver, that he can be the backup for Nikola Jokic, and he could be very good at that role. And I agree. As long as he can stay healthy and as long as he shoots the ball well, I think he's going to be Denver's best passing center that they've had since Mason Plumlee left. And maybe Isaiah Hartenstein's kind of in that general tier as well. But I think that Plumlee was really the last one that made a lot of great playmaking opportunities for everybody else. So if that's a thing that they can help, then that'd be great. Everybody's very excited about Julian Strother. Everybody's very excited about Mike. Everybody's very excited about Aaron. Everybody loves playing with Nikola, and I don't think anybody's gonna change on that front. But it does feel like there's just a lot of general excitement in the building, and the hunter versus hunted question wasn't asked, but it was generally accepted, I think, that everybody's excited to be there. They want to get this done, and they want to prove people that this was last year was a fluke. Last year was a thing that I don't think people were fully ready for. But now I think there's a lot of readiness. Everybody feels that they are being overlooked in a lot of ways. And I'm curious to see what ultimately happens with it, but feels like the Nuggets have gone under the radar a little bit. Hopefully that can change at some points, but not too soon. I think Denver works best as the underdog, and let other teams like OKC and Minnesota and Dallas continue to have their fun. If Denver is going to make a run, then it is probably going to be surprising those three rather than jumping out ahead of them. Okay. Folks, I think that is going to do it for this episode of Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at BetOnline and number 38. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Really appreciate all the love and support on the podcast. As always, let me know if you have any questions. Let me know what your takeaways were from Media Day, and if there's anything else that you want me to ask when I go back to practice tomorrow. Should be an interesting conversation. Should be a lot of fun. Denver's going to have 3 practices, and then they're going to Abu Dhabi. I won't be going on that, but I think I'm okay with that. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button on the way out. I will talk to you guys very soon.